Morning. My name is Jeremy Schwartz. I'm an investigative reporter here at the Austin American-Statesman. I'm with Asher Price, reporter on our state desk, who has recently written about the dispatching of 1,000 National Guard troops to the Texas-Mexico border. And Asher, there's been quite a few of these National Guard dispatches to the border in recent years. Why did the governor decide to send another group at this time?
Hi, Jeremy. I think that's a great question. Part of the way the governor couched it is that there's a crisis at the border. That in the last 3 weeks, he said there have been 45,000 people coming across the border illegally. The border that Texas shares with Mexico, of course, and but there have been hundreds of thousands of people coming across the last months, and even further back. So I think that's a good question about why now. I think part of it also is that he's trying to build off the end of the legislative session. He was flanked at Friday's announcement by some of Texas's other top policymakers, the Speaker of the House and the Lieutenant Governor, and I think it's their way of trying to keep some kind of political momentum as this legislative session here just wound down.
Yeah, I think the public sometimes wonders about the National Guard and what their role is down on the border. They aren't able to enforce immigration law, and so that's one of the first things that people need to know. What is the governor hoping that this influx of troops can accomplish operationally down on the border? And what has been the reaction from some of the border area, especially Democratic office holders, to this decision?
Well, that's right. The National Guard are not going to be arresting folks, and the governor doesn't want to get them in, doesn't want anybody to get into a shooting match. They're specifically being sent down to help out federal U.S. Border Patrol authorities in terms of the operations of temporary shelters in El Paso and the Rio Grande Valley. And he very specifically said these are going to be shelters for single adults. In other words, he's trying to keep them separate from the whole family separation issue that is bedeviled immigration enforcement down on the border. You had asked about what border Democrats are saying. I mean, there was State Representative Pancho Narvaez had sent out a tweet on Friday that said, if the governor really thinks this is a humanitarian crisis, why send National Guard troops down to the border? Why not send Health and Human Services state inspectors down to the, or state officials down to the border to help people who are in need?
Yeah, and I know Senator Jose Rodriguez from El Paso also was critical of the move, saying that the money would be better spent reimbursing cities like El Paso, even San Antonio, who have had to deal with surges of migrants coming through those cities after being released by ICE, and using quite a few local city services and state services. I think one of the things too that we sort of almost take for granted nowadays is that Texas, for the last 6 or 8 years, has been appropriating about $800 million in border security, most of which goes to DPS. In the beginning, there was quite a bit of discussion over that money. Is that money being well spent? Or do we have enough controls over that money? do we have a good sense of what that money is accomplishing, and was it at all during the session even a point of argument?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's right. Going back, starting in 2015, the Texas legislature through this past legislative session, has appropriated more than $2 billion for state law enforcement, the Department of Public Safety, to go down to the border to involve itself in border security. But there remains a big kind of open question about how specifically that $2.4 billion, I think it is, has been spent. I know you've done some, work into looking at it, especially in the early days, into some of those expenses. But there's very little non-shifting data on the upshot of that money. And in fact, some lawmakers this past session tried to propose a study of how that money was being spent, and it failed. So, there remains some unanswered questions about the specifics of how that money gets dispersed, basically.
Yeah, it's a lot of money, and it's in many ways a shifting target in terms of what success means along the border. A pretty amorphous definition. But just to sort of end on a fairly grim note, but sort of highlighting the need perhaps for more even humanitarian help down on the border. There was news last night of really tragic news of a family that was found dead on the U.S. side. They had just crossed into the Anzalduas Park in Hidalgo County. 2 infants, a toddler, and what maybe is presumed to be their mother in her 20s. And I know that Senator Cornyn, has weighed in a little bit this morning, saying that this is sort of the toll that can be expected while there's so much lack of agreement on how to really handle this influx that the border is seeing. Is the governor hopeful that these National Guard troops can prevent situations like this? I think
partly the governor has to show that he's doing something. I think it goes back also to your original question. I think that the governor can now say, I've sent 1,000 National Guard troops in addition to the 1,000 that are already there. He also mentioned, by the way, that these troops are paid for by the federal government. I mean, it's important. He has these different things he has to show. One is that he's doing something. Another is that beyond the, $800 million in additional money that was just appropriated by the legislature, that he's not, going to try to cost Texas taxpayers more money. The other thing is a kind of political thing. He said at his press conference on Friday that any harm that comes to Texas families, he was speaking in the context of separation, and not, of course, of this horrible thing that's just been reported that you mentioned, but these deaths. He said any separation is the fault of the federal government, of Congress, actually, specifically. And that he said Congress are reprobates. And I think that that's, for years, he and Texas policymakers could say, look, the Obama administration isn't doing enough here, and we have to step into the breach. Now he has President Trump, who ideologically is an ally of his, but there's still this border crisis, and so now it's Congress. We have a divided Congress, of course, and Congress is is not stepping up here. And in fact, the lieutenant governor, who was by the governor's side, said Congress has to get behind the president. And so, anyway, I think those kinds of political considerations are at play with this latest deployment.
Yeah, lots of politics at the border, and it's not always easy to suss out all the various machinations. But you did a great job with your story on Friday.
Thanks. I know it's something we'll that you, especially, but the newsroom as a whole, will be covering into the future, of course.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot. Thanks for joining us, and that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you.